It's wonderful to have you on here today, Katarina. Can you just give us a quick 30-second introduction on who you are?
Yes, so my name is Katarina Gospic, and I have a background as a physiologist, a medical doctor, and I have a PhD in cognitive neuroscience. And I'm the author of 8 books.
8 books. I haven't even read 8 books, so that's amazing. Well, no, I've read 8 books. So today we're going to talk about a few topics. I think the first one we really wanted to talk about was this idea of learning through play and play and learning and creativity. And I know
Yes.
you've done quite a bit of work on that. Do you want to give us anything that you would like to talk about with that?
Yes. I mean, this thing around play is very important because sometimes we tend to tell our children what to do and what to learn and what type of activities that we encourage them to. So when they're most creative and when they learn more than in any other context, it is when they play and they discover something. So
Mm-hmm.
imagine that you're walking with your kid and suddenly you pass a lawn or something and they see a ladybug and they just dive into the grass and
Yeah.
like, oh my god, what's this? And they start playing with it and such. That's actually very, very stimulating for the
Mm-hmm.
brain, for creativity, and they get to explore and be curious and all of those things. So
Okay, so what's happening there in the brain when they see the ladybug, as opposed to if I was a teacher and I said, now we're going to learn about ladybugs? Is there a difference there? That what is actually happening in the brain?
yeah, so when it comes to learning and to keep up the motivation, it's about the reward structure. So
Mm-hmm.
when we have this type of innate motivation, it's kind of driven of that we are curious about something. We want to learn, we want to explore. And when we are in that mode, we get a signal from the reward structure and it says like, yeah, this is very exciting and
Yeah.
continue, because as we get the reward signal, that signal encourages to continue with that
Uh-huh.
type of behavior. So that's why we can be more long term in our learning and stay motivated for a longer period of time.
So if a parent, I mean, I'm a parent, so if my daughter's sort of, daddy, look at this, and pulling me along, there's actually
Yes.
something, and wanting to show me something that she's just found in the shopping center or she's just found in a book, that's
Yes.
something different happening in the brain than if I was just in a classroom listening to a teacher tell me about it, right?
Yes. Because I mean, you can of course like to learn as well in a teaching
Yeah, yeah,
context.
yeah.
Of course, but it depends on who you are. But what's really the difference is that you have actually like the motivation comes from within you when you're like, oh, look at this, whereas when you're sitting in the classroom, it's all about someone feeding you.
Yeah,
Then of course you like that type of food and you will still be motivated to
yeah,
learn. But
yeah,
if you don't like the topic in the same sense, or maybe you don't like the way the teacher is teaching you, it will, it will collide maybe a bit and you will have a problem focusing and you will not have this type of trigger that you get if you got to do this on your own.
yeah,
Um, and there's also this word autonomy, which
yeah.
is very important when it comes to choices and feeling motivated and such. And again, that is all about making the choice yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
you still trick someone into doing something. So rather than telling your kid, like, first you should do A and then you should do B, it's better to say, okay, we have these tasks in front of us, it's A and B, and you can choose, how to do it, when to do it, and such. And
Yeah.
then you have suddenly handed them the autonomy, because then they will be like, oh, okay, I have these tasks, which one do I like, which one shall I start with, and so on.
My
Um,
daughter, I had a great example of that the other day. My daughter came home from school, and this is for all the parents out there and the teachers, and she said, Daddy, today we got to go outside and we had to find 5 things in the playground. And then we got to eat a carrot. I chose a carrot, but Zoe chose an apple. And you know, all the teacher had done was just flip over a science lesson and said, I'm going to let you go out and find 5 things in the playground, and then find out of these foods, you can choose which ones you're going to eat. And then we're going to talk about it and write about it and learn about all the things. And I think, and she talked about it all night because it had flipped over in that way, right? She'd been given the choice and she was motivated. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you can think of autonomy in terms of when it comes to food, because this feeling starts very early on. So when you were feeding your baby, you probably noticed that when she was maybe 4 to 6 months, she wanted to try herself. She wanted to grab something and put it in her mouth. And that's again all about autonomy. You want to start for yourself. And I mean, if you imagine as an adult that someone would feed you, that would kind of be an absurd thought, right? You would be like, oh, that's very uncomfortable. Because then you realize in just a second how it is when someone removes the autonomy from you. Because then I'm going to, tell you, how big the size is of the bite, when you're going to eat it, and you will be like, okay, I need to, swallow, and then it's the next. So we have this very strong force within us that we want to decide for ourselves. And when we allowed kids to play, we give them this type of autonomy, and then they get to do things their own way. And that's how you really make them blossom.
Exactly. So can we just talk about 2 things there? You mentioned the innate reward system. So I'm assuming that's something that's happening in the brain. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what is happening there with the innate reward system? So you're saying if they're doing play and having the choice and learner autonomy, it reacts. What does it do? It engages the innate reward system more. Is that right?
Yeah, especially over a longer period of time. So if you compare like the innate system, or when you have this internally versus getting an external reward, you see that if you take 2 groups of people and then you tell one group that if you perform on this task, we will give you money, whereas the other group, they just get to play for themselves, trying to perform. And what you see in their brains is that in the group that did not get any money, they will have a rather significant activation in the reward system. Whereas the group that got money, they actually have an even greater activation. But then when you repeat the experiment and do it again, and you tell the group that got money the first time that now you will just do this type of task yourself and you will not get any money, so just do it for fun, then it's like turning the light off. There will be no action in the reward system, whereas the group that didn't get any money from the start, they will continue playing with the task and their reward signal will be kind of constant. So the light is on.
So from that, you're saying in the short term, the extrinsic motivation is really rewarding and works, but in the long term, no, it's all about what's happening innately. So, I mean, we can talk a little bit technical here. What is the innate reward system called in the brain? Is there a part of the brain, or is it happening in many different places, or?
Yeah, so the most important place is called ventral striatum, or nucleus accumbens.
Can we say that one more time for the audience? The ventral
striatum. So it means the part that's a bit forward. And then this part can also be called nucleus accumbens. So it's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I spoke to you recently about this. You said that it was kind of like activating a pharmacy in the brain when they're doing play. What do you want to tell us of what you meant by that?
Yeah. So when it comes to reward, you usually talk about liking and wanting. So wanting is the feeling when you really want something. So within addiction, they describe it as you might want to drug very strongly and you're really driven towards it. But then once you take it, because you know it's bad for you won't really like it. Whereas, for other activities, like if we play or, do
Ah.
someone that we, love or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
we eat something good or, these natural things that makes us happy. Then we will both have the wanting that we want to approach this, and
Mm.
we will have the liking.
Wow.
And yeah, and looking at the substances that steers these behavior, dopamine
Mm-hmm.
is very much associated to the wanting part, and opioids, which is kind of
Ah.
the brain's and the body's own morphine, it's very much associated to the liking part.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, is there any research that sort of shows that there are benefits to learning long time with play and create? Because I mean, we know a lot of kids are now in schools doing tests and tests and tests, and they don't get much opportunity to do that. But there are some places where they're allowed to do play and stuff. Have you seen any research on that?
I I know that there has been a big discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I compare, for example, Sweden to Taiwan, I shortly stayed in Taiwan to do research.
Mm-hmm.
So I was introduced a bit to the culture, and
Can you
there,
can you still say hello to our friends in Taiwan? Can you remember how to say?
Ni hao.
Good job, Katarina. Ni hao. Okay,
You made me
continue.
nervous.
Sorry. No, that was good. That was good. That was very good. Continue.
And I also had this discussion with my colleagues because as I was there, their government had actually announced that they wanted advice from the people how to make their population more creative. Because they had noticed that,
Mm-hmm.
everything is made in Taiwan in terms of production, everything from Barbie to, iPhones, I guess. Whereas they didn't really have the innovation themselves. It wasn't their products. It was more other countries coming there and putting their production there. So with this announcement, this discussion started with my colleagues. And when I kind of explained to them how I grew up, I told them about play, how I went to kindergarten, and also when I started the first grade, I ended around 1:30 in the afternoon, and
Wow.
after
Yeah. So
uh,
that was in grade one, right? In the first grade.
yeah, from the first to the third grade,
You
and
finished
then
at 1:30.
yeah, approximately as I
Wonderful.
remember it, yeah. So we started like 8, and then we went home
Mm.
rather early. And after that, we had something called flitis, which is kind of a kindergarten for kids that are in the first to the third grade. So you
Mm-hmm.
go there and you get the snack and you get to play, and then your parents can come and pick you up after work.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to go home after school. And when I told this to my colleague, she was like, "So what do you do there?" And I told her, "We play." And I really had to explain to her what that meant, making puzzles, playing in the forests,
Yeah.
climbing trees, I don't know, doing sports, playing basketball or whatever we did.
And with all the other kids, right? So collaborating with them, communicating to them, all those things you'd be doing. And then,
Yeah.
so I'm going to ask you a trick question now. How many hours of homework did you do after that?
So not a lot. I would just say we had actually two types of homeworks from grade 1 to 3. And one was a reading homework. So we had to
Mm-hmm.
read this reading book that we had. And then our parents had to sign a paper saying
Yeah.
that we had read it and they heard. And then we had another task, which was like a writing task. So we
Yeah.
had to answer some questions and stuff like that. and that was it.
So
So
the moral of the story is if you go to school only to 1:30 and then you play for a few hours, don't do much homework, you too can write 8 books and end up as a neuroscientist and have a doctor as a child. So that's a little bit of advice for all the parents out there. Let your kids play and they might end up as neuroscientists and a medical doctor as well, just to throw that in there, okay? So,
and I'm to continue actually on that.
sorry.
After telling this to my Taiwanese friends,
Mm-hmm.
they were quite shocked, because when I walked home from work, which was usually very late at night, or went to grab something to eat, there were still very young children in some sort of school, when it was 7 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And everything in Taiwan was called school. So my friend told me that first they go to the normal school, but then they also have like basketball school, dancing school, math, piano school, and everything was school. So again, when I used the tube system and went down there late at night, I saw so many young people, because they had then attended their different types of schools, and then they were on their way home. So my friend told me that they were always in school, and everything was called school. So when we had this discussion, because she asked how Sweden could be so creative, because it's actually one of the most entrepreneurial place in the world. The only place more creative is kind of Silicon Valley and the US, but Sweden is usually in these types of competitions on second place or something. So she was very surprised, how can such a small country be so creative and produce these big companies and unicorns and still be on it even today, after IKEA and Volvo and everything, we have new companies up and coming. And it's the same thing within the music industry. We have also been very good at that. So and I really think, and when you try to understand what it is, that it has to do with play. And when it comes to music, there used to be these municipal music schools. So everyone was invited to learn how to play an instrument.
Oh, really? So did you grow up playing an instrument as well?
Yes.
So do you mind if we just talk about that for a minute? Because I mean, on a personal level, and also on what is happening in the mind here, because I know we discussed this recently. What did you play?
Actually, the flute.
Okay.
But I wanted to play the piano, but we didn't have a piano at my home. So I had a friend who taught me a bit, because she took piano lessons. But I'm not very good, even though I wish I was.
But you raise this as something that you think influenced a whole society and had benefits. So and I know you've done a bit of this research yourself, or you're aware of this research. What is actually happening then in the brain when people are playing music? You mentioned this the other day when you were talking about the flow state, or what is actually happening when people are playing music. Do you mind elaborating on that a little bit?
So in terms of flow, you get into, we all know the feeling, and then you will try, to define it more scientifically. But if everyone just think for a second, when you have been in a flow, it can be like playing an instrument or doing your sport, dancing, or maybe you're writing something and all the words comes to you. I mean, what's happening in the body is that, we start feeling very safe. We are kind of on the border, when we are doing something that's rather difficult, but it's not too difficult. So it's kind of on the perfect level for our achievement, because again, you don't achieve a flow if your task is too simple. Let's say that you're putting stamps on some, a letter or something. It's not very creative, or you don't feel like, oh, I'm so good at putting stamps,
Sorry, that was a good analogy. Continue.
Yeah. So, it still needs to be a bit tricky, but not too tricky, because if it's too tricky, you will just struggle and you will not really
Yeah.
reach this state of flow. But
Yeah.
when you do, your body feels great, the system puts you into this nice feeling. And one important part of the flow is that you have an instant feedback. Because if
Ah.
you imagine that you're playing the piano,
Mm-hmm.
you will get an instant feedback if you press the wrong key. And this is
Yeah.
very important as well for the flow state, because then we can adjust in a quick way.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we get this, nice feeling in the brain, in the body. And this encourages as well to just, continue.
Mm-hmm.
So if you imagine you're writing an essay and, you press the wrong key, and then you will also have a direct feedback because the screen becomes red and you're like, okay, I will fix that. And then you can continue.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
if you are, surfing, you will also feel like, oh, I'm losing my balance, and you have
Yeah.
to adjust.
Okay, so that's really interesting. You mentioned that if you hear the wrong note, you will move out of that flow state for those seconds. But nobody has to teach you that's the wrong note. And
Yeah.
I think that's what's very interesting. So why is it that with music, you don't need to be taught? You just can hear that it's the wrong note. My daughter's only 6 and plays piano, and she knows, she'll go, dun, 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 it's the wrong note, and go back to the next one. Why is that, say, with music, you don't actually need to be taught it's the wrong note? You need to be taught the right notes, but you don't need to be taught it's the wrong note.
Yeah. And that's because when we hear music, we also learn how the music should sound, and we will have an expectation what will come next. So this kind of becomes prepped in our brain. So if it goes in a way that we don't expect, like your daughter is playing this melody and she probably has it in her head like how it should go, and then if the doesn't match the key she's pressing, it's a discrepancy and it's an error signal, and then you need to adjust quickly to continue. So it's not that you necessarily come out of your flow just because you get this instant feedback. It's more that you just adjust to continue. Whereas if it would be, a very big mistake and you don't know how to adjust it, then you might come out of it, in the same sense that if you fall off from your surfing board, you will also get out from your flow. So falling off from your surfboard is a very big error signal.
Yeah.
So in order to get back to it, you have to swim out and jump on the board again, and that's kind of a procedure. And it's the same thing in music. If let's say that there are 2 parts of the melody you're going to play, and the first part is on this perfect threshold for your capacity, whereas the second part is too difficult, then you will also fall out from the stage because the error signal becomes too big, because trying,
there's too many errors, right?
Yeah, and it's not working, and you don't know how to proceed. And it's the same thing if you're writing something. Let's say that you are writing about something that you have in your head, and suddenly you come to a part where you don't have that type of knowledge. It will also be a bit, okay, it's too difficult.
Yeah, and it's the same when we're talking, right? If you're talking about a topic you know so well and you've done it for so many years, and you get into a flow in the conversation, and then suddenly if it gets too out of your reach, you start to sort of, your words get less together, and you're not forming sentences as well. So that just led me to 3 quick questions then. So this state of flow, you mentioned a few times there that if it's too difficult, they can't stay in that flow. So it's all about that, knowing how much more difficult. So that's a really good point for parents there to understand, and teachers obviously, but to understand that I notice a lot of parents, I've worked with parents all over Asia and over the last 15 years, they always want to go +4, they want to go just way too high. And then they get frustrated because their children are not, they're giving up, sort of like, I don't want to keep doing this. And that's because they're just pushing it too far, right?
For sure. So it's very, and this is why, how to say, technology also can be so good, because it's like having your personal.
Nice segue there, Katarina. Continue. Good segue there. Go on.
But it is. Because it's like you have your personal trainer that tunes this type of level for you in a very automatic way. And I mean, the more children that has used the technology, the more you know how to adjust the level for each individual, rather than you being a teacher having 30 kids that you need to take care of and just, run around to coach them to be on the exact same, or the exact level for them. So that becomes
Yeah.
much more
Yeah.
difficult. So, I mean, in one sense, it doesn't need to be harder than just realizing that, if we are approaching a goal and there are 10 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 10, we
Mm-hmm.
can't start with 5, we just can't. You start from
Exactly.
1 and then, take it as it goes.
So do you think eventually, if with tech and kids learning on apps and things like VR and XR
Yeah.
and things, do you think that because we'll be able to give the feedback, collect the
Mm.
data on that, we might end up in a world where every child just has their own individual sort of curriculum almost, right? It's
Yes.
just pacing everything at their optimal pace, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think it can be really, really good if we do it in the right way. And then another thing is that I think we sometimes should realize as well that, why need everyone, like, why need everyone, um, why do you need to learn like the same amount of things? Like sometimes I see school, like you have these types of different topics, and each topic have a bucket, and then we say, okay, everyone needs to fill their bucket to
Mm.
this level, and it needs to be the same for everyone.
Yeah.
And it's kind of so weird, because it is as if everyone should have your job in society. And I mean, we kind of need the diversity, and we are good at different things.
Yeah.
So I think that when we start letting go a bit of that, of course, we should have some basic skills, but forcing kids into all of these buckets, learning
Yeah.
exactly this, and if you haven't learned exactly this, you are not good.
Yeah.
Uh, for me, it's just a very weird way of thinking.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, what I see a lot of in language learning is teachers are getting all the kids to one level, right? So one kid might have come from here up to that level, and another child came from here up to that level. But
Yeah,
no, they're not letting anyone go above that level, because that's the level for this class, and
yeah,
that's what the language level we expect. And, that's the test you're going to do. So, and that's just not, and then unfortunately, there's one child who's in their language learning flow state. They're
yeah,
motivated, they're getting feedback, they're doing so well, and then they don't get to go any further. So you must be really excited then, as a neuroscientist working with technology.
yeah.
Do you feel like finally we're at this point of like almost a renaissance in learning, where we have something now that's going to meet how our brains work? I mean, we've been
Yeah.
talking about this since Aristotle, and now it's 2020, and I feel like it's now finally we have the tools that link
Yeah.
to can actually match what the brain does. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have all the possibilities in the world. So now it's just about using this in the right way to get this type of leverage to make every kid bloom in their own way. And again, if you're good at languages, go ahead. And if I'm good at science, let me go ahead.
Mm.
And that is something that should be stimulated, so we can become really, really good at something, because that's also when we become creative. And usually creativity is about taking two existing things, combining them, and creating something new
Something new, lovely. Yeah.
from that people can use, and that has some sort of a meaning. And speaking of which, if you look at kids, they are usually very very creative when they are young. So if you give them these tasks where you ask them, okay, what can you do with the brick? They come up with, a billion different solutions, and everyone is kind of classified as a genius. And as you continue doing these tests, the older you get, the worse you become. So when you're like 25 or an adult, it's the
Mm-hmm.
opposite. So if there was just a small part not being geniuses when they were like 4 or 5, it flips. So when you look at the 25-year-olds, there are just a few
Yeah.
taking the genius category, and the rest are, just average.
Yeah.
And it has also been a very big discussion in the scientific community. Why is this happening? And one of the discussions have them been, of course, that yeah, we force people into the same system. So again, going back to this ladybug algorithm, like
Mm.
when we are young, we are allowed to go to the grass and be like, oh my god, what's this? Whereas the older we get, the more forced we become in terms of what to learn, what to read, what to do. Everyone is always telling us things.
Yeah.
So even though we think we are adults having our autonomy, it's actually taken away from us.
Mm-hmm.
you know for like 10 years, Google have been the inspiration for, let's do whatever we want on Fridays and be
Yeah. Yeah.
creative.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that type of thinking actually is very much in tune to the ladybug, because it's
Yeah. I was
about,
just thinking that.
yeah, letting the older kids play and to do whatever they want and to read up, and again to have this curiosity. So yeah, it's just
So
weird.
it's not the brain. The brain's not changing once you turn 25, right? It's not like that part of the brain disappears. This curiosity, whichever part of the brain it is, it's just the environment that we're in changes. You would
Yeah.
argue that, right? So, and so that does bring us to another question. We've been talking a lot about play and kids and creativity, etc. But for younger kids, I mean, I think a lot of adults sort of say to you, "Oh, well, I'm 40. I can't possibly do something new, or I can't learn something." Do you think that that's from a neuroscience point of view? How true is that? I mean, this idea that you can't keep learning something when you get older.
No, it's not true at all.
Great. I mean, that's useful. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, because I mean, again, looking at our survival, it has always been about adjusting and adapting. So it's not about, how to say, the survival of the fittest, it's the survival of the most adaptable.
Mm.
So, with that said, and maybe more important than ever, we need to learn new things, especially with the digital transformation, because otherwise we will not be in the game playing anymore. And in terms of the brain, it's always prepared. It's a bit like muscles. So,
Mm.
I mean, I'm sure you have seen these elderly people who are very fit and they run
Yeah.
like ultra marathons, and they look amazing. And the same thing goes on with our brain. So if we don't do anything, if we don't exercise, it will decay.
Yeah.
Whereas if we take care of it, like meditating, for example, it has been shown to keep your brain very fit, but also learning new things.
I saw that research on the lady. It was a French lady, I think, they started testing on a mass test at 100, and then she would do a
Yeah.
test every 6 months till she was 106, and her scores were improving over time,
Yeah.
because they said one was the backwash of having to do the test, right? So the test was keeping her mind active, which was then having a positive effect and then leading her to get better results. And I thought, well, if you're 100 and you can keep learning, there's no excuse for people to be
No.
rethinking and relearning with their kids. Yeah, I mean, this has been so interesting, talking about play and learning and creativity. And I think a lot of that is about letting your kids go a bit, right? As you said, letting them go find the ladybug and stuff. So do you think that there's a lot of parents who have issues with sort of, the safety of all of this, worrying about what's going to happen to the kids? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. Of course, parents worry. I mean, it's their nature. But in terms of letting kids grow, you also need to let them go a bit. Again, giving them this type of autonomy and giving them the space to be creative and to explore. And it has actually been a discussion what happens when we protect kids too much. And
Mm-hmm.
I think especially today with our cell phones, because now we are so used to plan everything. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, before you go out, you look, okay, which is the best lunch place to eat? You know, what
Yeah.
shall I order? So you never commit any daily mistakes anymore. Like it's like you never buy a bad sandwich and be like,
Yeah.
oh God, this was such a bad sandwich.
That's a great, we never make daily mistakes anymore. That's a great quote.
Yes.
Continue. Yeah.
And yeah, this is actually bad because it tends to make us more anxious and more worried, and also worried being alone with our feelings because we are not exposed to them on this daily basis. I mean, when we grow up, you know, we committed lots of mistakes and we got lost, and you know, our friends did not show up and we disappeared. And I'm thinking about
Yeah.
one friend. When I was in the fourth grade, we were in this big forest running around during a sports day, and this guy disappeared because he got lost in the forest.
Oh.
And basically 10 hours later, they got a call from a gas station and they had found him. And you know, the teacher was like, oh my God, we lost the kid in the forest. And then he showed up very far away. But I mean, imagine that, you know,
Today.
I mean, handling that type of anxiety,
Yeah.
being alone, but still managing.
Yeah.
I mean, it obviously makes you grow,
Ah.
it makes you handle things and such. And imagine a kid today that is so dependent on their cell.
Yeah.
I mean, they have never been lost. I haven't been lost for 10 hours, but I have
No.
been lost for maybe 2 hours.
Yeah.
And, you know, my friends didn't show up, or I lost my parents in the store. And, you know, that feeling of panic when you're like, oh my God, where am I? And you need to make it through by yourself.
Yeah. I really
Yeah.
like, yeah. I have one little side note on that. I took my daughter to Spain, lucky me, and we were in Seville, and I'd wake her up we'd get up really early, and I'd say, we're leaving the phone, just you and me, and we just would go walking for like 2 hours and have no idea where we were going, no memory of where the hotel was. And she still now, a year later, just says, oh, that was my favorite time, Dad, because I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know what was on the next corner. And every time we got to a corner, I would say, left or right or straight, it's up to you. And I felt watching her doing that was really the essence of just letting her take. I mean, she still had Daddy supporting her, but she could make those decisions. And it was a really nice experience, I thought. Sorry,
Yeah.
continue.
Well, and I mean, those moments are so important, and we got them for free kind of every day
Yeah.
up. And I mean, just imagine a kid's mindset today. They don't even have that experience, maybe.
No.
And
Like you used to meet a friend, right? You'd say, I'll meet you at this corner at 3 o'clock on Sunday. And you just waited there. And if no one showed up for an hour, you thought about stuff. You didn't have a phone to play. You didn't read Instagram. You weren't or you might meet someone else at the stop that you're waiting at, and then they would come. And if they didn't come on time, you waited for them. So you'd learn all those things. Yeah, I see your point. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, go on. Sorry, I keep interrupting you there because it's very interesting.
It's great.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the conclusion that lots of people, not just kids, also adults, are lacking this today. And I mean, it seems like there is a generation now not even having that type of experience. And of course, that affects us in terms of how to handle ourselves, how to handle our feelings, how it is to be, every day anxious and being lost and not know what to do or not know what's going to happen, and all this type of uncertainty. We have removed that, and then we ask ourselves why we are so anxious. And
Yeah, right. And it seems when you say it so obvious, but until you said it, it didn't seem so obvious, right? So
yeah,
what advice do you have? I mean, do you think that there is anything that parents or teachers can be doing to ensure that we are still having that unknown and letting go?
yeah. I think it's actually important to bring in a bit of uncertainty, like a good uncertainty, into
Mm-hmm.
life again, and let the kids feel more independent. I think it would be great to do some exercises without their phones, letting them out. And again, there's so many things happening, not just that you don't know where to go, or where you are, but also you need to start interacting with people again. It's like
Mm.
becoming human again. um, and yeah, that is so important. So that would actually be one of my advices, that parents maybe should put away both their own cell phone but also their kids.
That's a very
And
good point, parents. Put your own. I never put my own phone away, and then I told my daughter not to play on her iPad, and she
yeah,
just says, "Put your own phone away, Daddy." So yeah, lead by the example, right? Continue, Katarina.
so I mean, and you know this better than anyone, but kids don't do what you say, they do as you do, right? Yeah, just that is a great start. Put the phone away sometimes, and also make the kids make their own decisions. Don't
Mm.
control everything. Give them the autonomy, and if you want them to do certain things, give them the freedom then to decide when and how, and in what order. So you try to inject a bit of play, and you decide it for yourself. And then I also think you should allow kids to fail, because
Mm.
it's kids today that we want to make everything so perfect from the start. And you should just succeed at your first try. And obviously that's not how we work. I mean, we know how many mistakes we have committed throughout life. And if we just try to curl the children never to commit mistakes, we will not make them strong enough to face the world out there. So
Yeah.
uh, in a good way, we need to bring in some good uncertainty, some good failures and all of that, in order to learn and to build resilience.
Wonderful. I think that's an excellent place to wrap it up with that awesome advice for parents. And I think teachers as well. I think a lot of teachers are afraid to let their kids fail because they're being pressured to make sure the kids aren't failing in their classes and stuff. Katarina, it's been absolutely wonderful. If anyone wants to find you in the web or in the internet, where do they look you up if they want to know more about what you do or your books? Where would they find you?
So either on LinkedIn, so then I'm called Katarina Gospic. I'm also at Instagram under the same name.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my own webpage, which is brainbowlabs.com.
Rainbow Labs, right? And did you say that you were bringing out an app soon?
Yes, so I actually have an app called the Dr. Gospic, which is about meditation and how to relax. So it's available both on screens, like on your computer screen, on your cell phone, but also in VR. And right now we are working a lot towards schools. As we're speaking, I'm conducting a small study at the high school to see if
Mm-hmm.
we can make the students less stressed and, have a tool to handle their emotions and such. So we have that available both in English and Swedish.
Wonderful. Well, I would like to say thank you on behalf of the parents and teachers and students around the world that you are doing so much positive work into connecting the discourses of neuroscience and education and learning, and not seeing these as separate things, that by working together with all these things, we're definitely going to make better learning and more positive experiences for kids all around the world. So thank you, Ms. Gospic, and Ms. Gospic, and have a great day. And hopefully we'll speak again soon. And
Yeah.
bye-bye.